The events this week here in Cleveland and next week in Philadelphia are the really continuation of a long American tradition. Ever since the mid-1800s, the parties have convened ahead of each presidential election. But the role of the conventions has changed quite a bit over the years.
Conventions are really a big infomercial for the party.
An infomercial with dance breaks and colorful attire.
It's a chance for the party to show what it's all about and what it wants to be about. It's highly scripted, very programmed.
And yet it wasn't always that way. In generations past, these were the places presidential hopefuls won or lost their bids.
It used to happen that a very small number of party leaders could have a tremendous amount of influence about who the national ticket was.
Those party leaders gathered in a smoke-filled room, a phrase a reporter coined at the 1920 Republican Convention, describing a late-night meeting that resulted in the nomination of Warren Harding. In those days, the voting process was tedious at times. Democrats in 1924 cast more than 100 ballots over 16 days before settling on a nominee.
No party today would want to have the semblance, or in fact reality, of such disunity before a national television audience.
Prior to Franklin Roosevelt, candidates didn't even show up to accept their nominations in person. They considered it too aggressive.
Back to George Washington, the great tradition was of the reluctant candidate. You know, this office is too noble for the likes of me, but if the people were to choose me, I would, out of a sense of duty, serve.
But politicians eventually started campaigning for their party's support. And by the mid-20th century, a handful of states allowed voters to have a say.
Who are you voting for, Joe?
Well, Matt, I'll tell you, I'm voting for Mr. Taft because I think he's the best qualified man in the country for the job.
But the delegates they sent to the conventions didn't hold much sway. In 1952, 15 states held Democratic primaries, and Estes Kefauver won almost all of them.
We want Kefauver! We want Kefauver!
But he still lost the nomination to Adlai Stevenson, who hadn't entered a single one. Things changed, however, after the tumultuous 1968 Democratic Convention in Chicago. Protesters fought with police outside the convention hall, while inside,
I proudly accept the nomination of our party.
Political opponents of Vice President Hubert Humphrey complained the party unfairly shut them out of the delegate selection process.
There was a tremendous sense of betrayal by people on the left within the Democratic Party, and so they pushed through a series of rules that made primaries much more important in the selection of delegates and thus in the selection of Democratic nominees.
Republicans followed with similar changes of their own, and historians say the increased reliance on the primary system changed the landscape of presidential politics.
The smoke-filled room has been aired out, and it's been replaced by a kind of Silicon Valley workspace filled with very smart number crunchers.
The last time a convention started without a clear nominee was 40 years ago, at the Republican Convention in 1976.
West Virginia, 8 votes for Reagan, 20 votes for Ford.
Gerald Ford narrowly defeated Ronald Reagan, relying on uncommitted delegates who weren't obligated to vote based on the primary results. The conventions haven't been nearly as suspenseful over the past few decades, but they still serve important functions.
In addition to highlighting the presidential nominee, conventions provide a chance for the party to showcase its future talent, its up-and-coming rising stars.
Barack Obama!
Like the state senator who first walked onto the national stage at the Democratic Convention in 2004.
There is not a black America and a white America and Latino America and Asian America. There's the United States of America.
Clearly, the impact of the conventions can extend well beyond the selection of the presidential tickets.
You know what the outcome is going to be, but it's still a chance for the parties to highlight and showcase their party, their message, their plans for the future in prime time in front of a much larger audience.